Good evening. In what may be the most audacious American military operation since the 2003 Iraq invasion, President Donald Trump has announced the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The operation, conducted in the early hours of January 3rd, involved large-scale strikes on Caracas and the seizure of Maduro from his residence within the Fort Tijuana military installation. Russia's response to this extraordinary development reveals much about the current state of international relations and the limits of Moscow's influence. Let's examine what actually happened. According to multiple sources, U.S. Special Forces, reportedly Delta Force operators, extracted Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores from their compound during a coordinated strike that hit military installations, air bases, and the legislative building in Caracas. Trump himself posted an image on social media showing Maduro blindfolded aboard the USS Iwo Jima, bound and wearing a flotation device. The president stated America would temporarily run Venezuela and tap its vast oil reserves. Now, Russia's reaction is particularly telling. The Russian Foreign Ministry issued statements condemning what it termed an act of armed aggression against Venezuela. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov spoke with Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, expressing what Moscow described as firm solidarity with the Venezuelan people and promising continued support. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite the strong rhetoric, Russia's response has been notably restrained. The Foreign Ministry statement acknowledged being extremely alarmed and called for dialogue to prevent escalation, but stopped short of threatening any concrete action. This is significant because Venezuela has been a key Russian ally in Latin America for years, with Moscow providing military equipment, economic support, and diplomatic cover. Why the measured response? Several factors are at play. First, Russia is deeply entangled in its ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Moscow simply lacks the capacity to project meaningful military power into Latin America while maintaining its operations in Eastern Europe. The irony of Russia condemning armed aggression while conducting its own military campaign isn't lost on observers. Second, and perhaps more importantly, Trump's administration has been engaging with Putin on Ukraine peace negotiations. Just last week, Trump met with Ukrainian President Zelensky and spoke with Putin about a potential settlement. An overly aggressive Russian response to Venezuela could jeopardize those talks, something Moscow cannot afford given the mounting costs of the Ukraine conflict. Third, there's the practical matter of what Russia could actually do. Unlike Syria, where Russia has bases and proximity, Venezuela is an ocean away. Russian military presence there consists of advisors and equipment sales, not combat forces. The lack of any Russian military resistance during the operation, despite years of military cooperation, speaks volumes about the limits of Moscow's reach. The Chinese response has been similarly muted. While China condemned the action, China has significant economic interests in Venezuelan oil. Trump explicitly mentioned that China would continue getting oil, suggesting some understanding may already be in place. What's particularly notable is what Russia didn't do. There were no threats of retaliation, no mobilization of forces, no suggestion of counter-operations. Instead, Moscow positioned itself as a diplomatic mediator, calling for dialogue, a far cry from the confrontational posture one might expect given the circumstances. The geopolitical implications are profound. This operation demonstrates American willingness to conduct regime change operations against sovereign governments, regardless of international law or allied concerns. European allies responded with calls for restraint and respect for international norms, but took no concrete action. Latin American nations like Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico condemned the operation more forcefully, with Brazilian President Lula stating it crossed an unacceptable line. Russia's inability to meaningfully respond also signals something important about the current balance of power. Despite talk of multipolarity and challenges to American hegemony, when Washington decided to act decisively in what it considers its sphere of influence, neither Russia nor China could do anything substantive to prevent it. The much-discussed Russian military contingent in Venezuela evidently posed no obstacle whatsoever to American special forces. The humanitarian and legal questions are significant. The operation bypassed Congress, with Democratic lawmakers questioning its legality under the War Powers Act. The UN Security Council is meeting to discuss the situation, though American veto power effectively neutralizes that body. Questions about civilian casualties from the strikes remain unanswered. For Russia, this represents another strategic setback. A key ally has been removed from power, and Moscow's inability to prevent it demonstrates the limits of Russian power projection. The strong words but weak action pattern echoes Russian responses to other setbacks: plenty of condemnation, little concrete response. The long-term consequences remain unclear. Trump has stated America will run Venezuela temporarily, with Vice President Delcy Rodriguez nominally in charge as long as she does what Washington wants. Opposition leader Edmundo Gonzalez, who claims to have won the disputed 2024 election, has also been mentioned as a potential leader. The transition's legitimacy and stability will depend largely on how the Venezuelan military and population respond. What we're witnessing is perhaps the starkest demonstration yet of American unilateral action under the Trump administration. Whether this represents a new template for U.S. foreign policy or a unique situation taking advantage of Venezuela's isolation and Maduro's weakness remains to be seen. But Russia's response, or lack thereof, tells us much about the current state of global power dynamics. Strong words from Moscow cannot conceal the fundamental reality. When America chose to act in its perceived sphere of influence, Russia could do little more than issue statements and call for dialogue. The capture of Maduro may prove to be one of the defining moments of Trump's second term, setting precedents that will reverberate through international relations for years to come. For now, Russia can condemn, China can express concern, and the international community can debate legality. But the fundamental fact remains unchanged. Maduro is on a U.S. warship, and Moscow watched it happen. That's the analysis for tonight. The situation continues to develop, and we'll be watching closely to see whether Russia's restrained response holds or whether Moscow finds ways to respond that don't involve direct confrontation with Washington. For now, the message seems clear. In this new era of great power competition, spheres of influence still matter, and some powers are more equal than others.